Wi-Fi network has been locked, and the board needs that password. I am not asking for anything unreasonable. This community has always shared that connection, and you have no right to cut everyone off without any notice. I have already placed $6,000 in fines against your deed. And I want you to understand that I am. Homeowners Association President Loretta Crampton told the homeowner at 29 Highland Ridge Court that his refusal to share his Wi-Fi password with the Cedarbrook Estates Board was an ongoing act of community noncompliance. That $6,000 in fines had been entered against his property deed, and that she had the full authority of the board behind her to initiate foreclosure proceedings against his home if he continued to withhold what she called a shared community resource from his neighbors. She said the words shared community resource about a man's private internet connection without blinking even once. What she did not know was that the homeowner was a network security engineer who had documented every unauthorized device that had ever connected to his network, and that the foreclosure threat she was making had no legal foundation whatsoever, and that the moment she destroyed his door handle on her final visit, she would hand him a criminal and civil case that was going to end everything she had built on that board. Harlan Calloway, 41, a senior network security engineer for a cybersecurity firm based out of Miami, had lived at 29 Highland Ridge Court in the Cedarbrook Estates gated community of Coral Springs, Florida, for 2 years. Cedarbrook Estates sat in Broward County, an upscale neighborhood where the entrance had a staffed security booth. Homes started at over $1 million. And the HOA dues were high enough that residents expected discretion and professionalism in return. Harlan had purchased his property after years of renting while building his career, and had set up his home network the week he moved in with the kind of precision that comes from spending a decade in cybersecurity. He had initially left his Wi-Fi unsecured because he was still configuring his system and had not yet gotten around to setting a password. He noticed the slowdown 6 weeks after moving in. He logged into his router dashboard on a Tuesday evening and found 11 unrecognized devices connected to his network. Smartphones, laptops, and tablets belonging to people he had never given any permission to use his connection. He identified 3 of the devices as belonging to the household at number 31 Highland Ridge Court based on their device names. Number 31 was Loretta Crampton's address. Harlan changed his password that same evening, a 32-character encrypted string that nobody on his street was going to guess. He did not send a notice to anyone. He did not post anything on the neighborhood app. He simply secured his own private network the way any reasonable person would and went to bed. Loretta Crampton knocked on his door the following afternoon. She introduced herself as HOA president of Cedarbrook Estates and told him, with complete composure, that she had noticed the neighborhood Wi-Fi was no longer accessible and that she would need his new password. Harlan looked at her for a long moment and asked which section of the Cedarbrook Estates governing documents required him to share his private internet connection with anyone. Loretta told him it was a community standard and that he would come to understand that once he had been in the neighborhood a bit longer. Then she smiled and waited. Harlan told her no and closed the door. Before we go any further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. We genuinely love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. And if you believe that a Wi-Fi password is private property and no HOA president has the right to demand it, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button and join us right here on HOA Unhinged. Loretta came back 3 days later. She knocked on Harlan's door on a Friday afternoon and told him she had given the matter some thought and that she was prepared to be reasonable about it. All she needed was the password, and the whole thing could be resolved quietly without any formal board action. Harlan told her the answer was still no, that his Wi-Fi was his private property, and that no community standard required him to share it with anyone. Loretta told him he was making a mistake and left without another word. The first violation notice arrived the following Monday. It cited Harlan for withholding a shared community resource under what Loretta had titled the Cedarbrook Estates Community Connectivity Standard, a policy Harlan had never seen before and had certainly never agreed to. The fine was $1,500. Harlan pulled up the complete Cedarbrook Estates governing documents from the Broward County Clerk's website that same evening and searched every single page for any reference to internet access, Wi-Fi, network sharing, or community connectivity. There was nothing. The policy Loretta had cited did not exist in any document ever filed with the county. He photographed the notice, saved a copy of the governing documents, and put both in a folder. He did not pay the fine. Loretta came back a third time the following week, and this time she brought the full weight of her HOA title with her. She stood on his porch with her clipboard and her lanyard, and told him the board had authorized her to pursue lien proceedings against his deed, and that foreclosure was on the table if he continued to refuse. She said the word foreclosure over a Wi-Fi password with complete seriousness and without a single trace of self-awareness. Harlan recorded the entire conversation on his phone from the moment she knocked. He asked her again to identify the specific governing document that required him to share his internet connection. She told him the board's authority covered all community resources and that his network fell squarely under that authority. He asked her to put that in writing. She said the violation notices were already in writing and that he had 30 days to comply before the lien was filed. The second and third violation notices arrived that same week, each one citing the same non-existent policy, each one adding to the accumulated balance, which had now reached $6,000 against his deed. Harlan paid nothing and changed nothing. He forwarded everything to a property rights attorney in Fort Lauderdale named Sandra Owe, who had handled HOA overreach cases in Broward County for over a decade. Sandra reviewed the governing documents, confirmed the policy did not exist, and told Harlan the case was straightforward. She sent a formal cease and desist letter to the Cedarbrook Estates Board the following week. Loretta received the letter on a Thursday. She came to Harlan's door the following Saturday, and he did not open it. Harlan heard the knocking at 10:23 in the morning on that Saturday. He was in his home office, and he let it go unanswered. The knocking continued, harder this time, more insistent, the specific rhythm of someone who had decided that knocking louder would somehow produce a different result. Harlan stayed exactly where he was. He had already been advised by Sandra not to engage with Loretta directly while the cease and desist was active, and he had no intention of opening that door. Loretta did not stop. The knocking went on for 4 full minutes, escalating from a knock to a pound, from a pound to both fists against the door frame, from both fists to what sounded like her full body weight being thrown against the handle repeatedly. Harlan walked to his front hallway and stood on the other side of the door, listening to the sound of a woman completely losing her composure on his front porch in a gated community where the homes started at $1 million. He did not open the door. He picked up his phone and started recording the audio. Then the handle broke. The mechanism gave way under the sustained force of Loretta's repeated assault on it, and the handle separated from the door with a sound Harlan felt as much as heard. There was a brief silence on the other side of the door, then footsteps moving quickly down the porch path. Harlan opened the door. The handle assembly was hanging from the door frame at an angle, cracked housing, displaced locking mechanism, visible damage to the surrounding wood where the force had been applied. He photographed every inch of it from 6 different angles, with timestamps running on his phone. He photographed the porch, the path, and the street, where Loretta was already walking fast toward number 31 without looking back. He called Sandra Owe before he called a contractor. Sandra told him to preserve everything exactly as it was until she could document it formally. Then she told him they were no longer dealing with just a fabricated Wi-Fi policy. They were now dealing with criminal trespass and destruction of private property, and the case had just gotten significantly stronger. Sandra Oe filed the lawsuit in Broward County Circuit Court the following Monday morning, and it was built on 4 separate claims. The first was criminal trespass. Loretta had remained on Harlan's private property after being implicitly refused entry, and had used physical force against his door in a way that went well beyond knocking. The second was destruction of private property. The door handle damage was documented, photographed, and professionally assessed at $1,400 in repairs. The third was harassment. The documented pattern of 3 uninvited visits, fabricated violation notices, and foreclosure threats over a Wi-Fi password established a clear and sustained campaign of intimidation. The fourth was abuse of HOA authority. The community connectivity standard Loretta had cited across every violation notice did not exist in any governing document filed with Broward County and had been invented entirely by her. The Cedarbrook Estates HOA board received their copy of the filing the same day as Loretta and called an emergency session that evening. They had 3 options: defend Loretta, distance themselves from her, or remove her. They chose the fastest one. She was voted out of the presidency unanimously before the meeting even reached 30 minutes, and the board hired a separate attorney to represent their interests independently from hers. The civil case was heard in Broward County Circuit Court 4 months later. Loretta's attorney attempted to argue that the community connectivity standard was an implied community practice rather than a written policy. The judge asked him to identify where implied community practices were granted enforcement authority within the Cedarbrook Estates governing documents. He could not. The judge ruled in Harlan's favor on every single count. The fabricated fines were declared unenforceable and dismissed in full. Loretta was ordered to pay the door handle repair costs, Harlan's full legal fees, and damages the court described as compensation for a sustained and deliberate pattern of harassment over private property she had no right to access in the first place. Loretta Crampton sold her home at 31 Highland Ridge Court 8 months after the judgment. The Wi-Fi network at 29 Highland Ridge Court remained password protected. It always had been. Harlan Calloway got a new door handle installed the week the lawsuit was filed. He chose one with a deadbolt. If this story reminded you that your Wi-Fi password is yours, your door handle is yours, and no HOA president with a lanyard and a clipboard has any claim over either one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have an HOA story that sounds too ridiculous to be real but absolutely is, drop it in the comments, because we have learned that nothing is too ridiculous when it comes to this channel. See you on the next one, right here on HOA Unhinged.